Welcome to this episode of Neural Nectar Podcast, where we're going to talk about the human mind. We're going to discuss the many functions that it has. We're going to talk about what a mindset is, and we're also going to talk about the self. So, what is the mind, right? So, looking at it from a neuroscientific, from a psychological perspective, the mind, it's a very complex thing to talk about and to think about. If you were to ask just about anybody, what's the mind? They think, well, it's my thoughts, right? Is that it? No, that's not it, right? The mind has so many layers and so many levels. You could ask somebody else and they'll say, my beliefs. Okay, well then is that it? No. Well, some people will say, well, it's me. Was that it? No. There's so many aspects to it because of the many functions it has. From a neuroscientific perspective, we talk about the brain, we talk about the brain-body connection, the mind-body connection. If you look at the brain, if you look at the body, even neuroscientists and many psychologists still today will tell you we still haven't found where the mind is because the mind is so complex. Think of the mind and the brain and in the body as more of a bunch of different things working together, almost emanating the mind. So far, that's as much as we've been able to find as far as scientific research. It's just so complex that the mind cannot be placed in just one part of the brain, one part of the body. It's more like all of it working together causes the mind. So the mind really is a lot of combination. The mind is a lot of this plus this plus this plus this plus this, right? And it's a lot of this plus this plus this plus this at this time. This plus this plus this plus this in this situation. And we'll talk about why. The mind, throughout an evolutionary perspective, came up through possibly necessity, the necessity for survival, our desire to survive, if anything. The fact that we have one now and the functions that we've been able to identify so far should be there, as far as evolution is concerned, for our survival, that they are there for our survival. Although it has been discussed many times in science that sometimes certain mutations happen that are deficient, that we don't want. Some happen that just happen to be there. And some happen that are so much better for us than we anticipated that we prefer that those mutations happen. Like the fact that we have certain mental capacities today. One of them is attention. The fact that we pay attention to things. That is something that we don't realize, but that's something that our mind is doing. The things that you pay attention to are all influenced by what's already in your mind. Which, getting into that, leads into perception, another function of the mind. The way in which we perceive things is very closely tied to what we pay attention to. The reason why those two are very tied in is because of why we are doing it. Why we pay attention to something is closely tied to how we're perceiving that thing. Perception and attention are both very highly informed by our cognition, which is just another word for saying our thoughts, our beliefs, all of that collectively. Cognition is the voice in your head. Sometimes people close their eyes and imagine something. Any word for it, that little workspace of the mind, right, is working memory, is cognition, is where all of that happens. Another function of the mind is emotion. Emotion are all of those feelings, the things that we categorize as feelings, right? I feel sad, I feel happy, I feel hungry, I feel thirsty, all of those things, both the physiological and the ones that we consider to be more psychological. And another is intuition, right? That gut instinct feeling, those butterflies in the stomach, those hairs standing up in the back of your neck, all of those instinctual feelings, those instinctual responses to low tone frequencies, to high pitched voices, to very dark places, to people who are just a little off. All of those are gut instincts, ancient responses that come from our evolutionary ancestors that have been ingrained in our minds. The three last that I just talked about, cognition, emotion, and intuition, also happen to be the mind's three primary functions. These three work in coherence constantly throughout our mind, throughout our life, informing us of the decisions that we make, the places that we go, the people that we meet, the things that we say, the things that we do, everything we eat, all of it, everything, every experience that we've ever had, everything we've ever learned, every movie we've ever watched, every song you've ever heard, anything that you can think of that you have ever done, and even the things you can't think of that you've done, are all informing our mind constantly and all the time what to think, how to feel, what to do about it. That is the evolutionary perspective on why we have a mind at all. It's meant to protect us. It's meant for our survival. The fact that you went through the things that you went through will forever inform your story, will forever inform the way in which you live your life. Cognition, emotion, intuition. They will forever inform, stain, filter the way in which you perceive the world, in which you perceive reality. Which is why many neuroscientists, psychologists, neuropsychologists go as far as to say that the way in which we perceive the world is halfway illusion, halfway reality. Much of how we perceive the world is a construct of what is already within our mind. Each and every single one of our own minds has what we call mental representations of the external world. There's even a mental representation of yourself in there, of your body, of the way in which you feel. There's already a mental representation of how you feel in certain situations that kind of just plays out sometimes. The mind is a very interesting and intricate place. And that's why all of these functions are some of the most interesting in research, some that biological psychologists, neuroscientists, and all sorts of different psychologists are currently researching and looking into, which are leading into much more complex and even scarier capacities of the mind. Imagination is that thing that we use when you close your eyes and you see something that isn't there, when you write a story, when you think of one off the top of your head, when you lie to your parents and you shouldn't. When you do things that are spontaneous, that could come out of nowhere, it's your imagination. And a lot of neuroscientists and psychologists now are very interested in how that comes about, particularly in the aspect of creativity. Human creativity for the longest time has pushed forward progress that we've made as far as society, science, academics, education, law, understanding of who we are and what we are doing here on this planet. Much of what we've done, like phones, laptops, radios, the hammer, the wheel, the ladder, many innovative tools, techniques, and technologies have come up through human creativity and through insight and just observing our environment. This human creativity comes from this imagination, this capacity to imagine, this capacity to think ahead, to predict. Visualization is one thing that a lot of people like to think about, and it's where you close your eyes and you see this thing, right? You bring to mind something, a physical thing that, has dimensions and properties like color and texture and shape, width, length, all of that sort of stuff. And you visualize these things, and some people use it as a form of meditation, some people use it as a form of manifestation, and we'll talk about those in a second. But visualization is also just a way of attention training, perception training, and it's actually also a really cool way just to get in tune with your own mind and to get in tune with sensory experiences and really appreciating what that is. If you sit down and just try to imagine an apple as vividly as you can, your pick, the reddest apple, greenest, pinkest, whatever color you want, pick your apple and try to imagine it in the most vivid detail you can. Try to imagine every little speck on there. Try to imagine the stem. Try to imagine everything you can about it. It turning upside down, opposite ways, everything you can. It's a really cool practice to use your mind in this way and to get to know the very capacities that you have mentally. Another thing within this imagination is also mentalization, bringing to mind something, right? You bring to mind an event, you bring to mind it's memory recollection. You can also bring to mind things that aren't there, right? If you want to, for example, I imagine that maybe somebody that is like directing a film might occasionally sit there and imagine what's going to happen first or what they want to see first, and then tell the actors, do this, try this, and because they want to see it actually play out. Or like, it's kind of like drafting, right? When you're writing a story, you're just kind of writing, and then you go back and you edit it. That's kind of how mentalization works. You do it up here, right? Like mental math is the best example that I can think of, where people kind of just sit there and 2 + 2 = 4. But it's crazy when you get into like the long division and the really difficult multiplication. I'm like, how did you do that so quickly up in there? Like, whoa. So things like that are some really cool mental capacities that also just happen to exist there. Another thing that also falls within this imagination realm is even the capacity of meditation. What is meditation, right? A lot of people think that it's just always this moment of sitting there in silence and stillness, and it can be, but meditation can be a lot of things. Meditation can sometimes mean observation. There are many techniques of meditation in which you're exercising, something like yoga. There are certain techniques of meditation in which you're actually walking. You're walking in nature, you're walking in a city, you're walking in a place of your choice, and you're meditating at the same time. It's a really cool technique. There are meditations in which you sit, close your eyes, you sit on a chair, you sit on the floor, you lie down, you pick a position of your choice, you close your eyes. There are some in which your eyes are open. There are some in which you're in silence. There's some meditative techniques in which you're listening to music, or it's guided meditation. If you kind of think of meditation as whatever works for you to calm your mind, to get in tune with yourself, to ground yourself, to gain better clarity, any of those, that could be meditation. Because meditation has many forms. It comes in many ways. Many people don't understand that sometimes prayer is a form of meditation too. Coming from a spiritual background, prayer and the form of meditation that is taught in, thinking about a phrase or thinking about a prayer or a certain image, that's also a form of meditation. So thinking of it from another perspective, sometimes people talk about manifestation. What is that? It's when you manifest this life for yourself. You manifest your reality. You manifest something, that you want or whatnot. But what does that actually mean when you manifest it? A lot of times people think that it's just, I'm going to think it, and that's it. It really is more so you're going to put it at a certain place in your mind where, you're meditating on it, you're visualizing it, you're mentalizing it, but then you're also enacting it, right? It's where this manifestation is meditation in action, right? Manifestation is, I am thinking about this, but I'm thinking about it to the point where I'm looking out for opportunities that are going to get me there. I'm looking out for the possibilities that are going to get me there. I'm looking out for anything and everything that's going to get me there. So that is manifestation, right? But it's also meditation at the same time. It's thinking about these things. It's thinking about your decisions, thinking about your choices, and making sure that every step you're taking really is getting you in the direction you want to go. When we talk about the mind, when we talk about mental capacities, a lot of what I've talked about is kind of you interacting with the world. A lot of it is yourself in the world, or yourself just kind of perceiving the world, taking it all in. A lot of, like, for example, perception, right? The way we perceive the world is just an interpretation of external stimuli, right? It is an interpretation of light. It is an interpretation of sound. Right now, you watching this video or listening to this podcast, your rods and your cones, your neurons in your eyes, they are interpreting these images, these particles, these cells on the screen. They're interpreting it for you to see me. The structures in your ear that contribute to the auditory system are currently translating, they're converting these sound waves into electrical stimuli to your neurons in your brain in order for you to understand this as language, which is English, the one we're currently speaking. The mind has a lot of these structures, a lot of these capacities in order for you to survive with the world, right? In order for you to perceive and live in and interact with the world. But there's one one faculty of the mind that is extremely interesting called interoception. And this is actually inner awareness. I like to think of it as your awareness of the mind-body conversation, right? When you talk about, I feel sick, you're feeling it in the body, but you're talking about it up here. It's that mind-body conversation of what is being experienced in my life, right? It's when you can tell me that you went through a traumatic experience when you were 10 years old. That is the mind and the body both, hey, you remember that? Yeah, I remember that. All right, let's talk on it. So mind-body connection is something that we take for granted because the interoceptive capacity of understanding, right? Like it's almost, interoception is almost like, as far as consciousness, it's almost as far as interoception is a sense of me. It's the sense of, I am aware that I am experiencing this right now, because you have this inner awareness that you have an internal environment that separates you from the external environment. Interoception is the sense in your mind that there is something in here that is not out there, right? That's interoception. It's the separation of you from the outside world, this understanding that there is a division between you and this outside world called your body, right? You exist within this body, but then this body exists within this world, and this body is what is keeping you from this world. So interoception is almost like the sense of, you know how you are just looking through your eyes, like you don't got to think about it, it's just like you open and like that's it. Like there are no lines. Like when you watch TV, there's a frame around it. There is no such thing in our regular vision. I like to think of interoception as that capacity, the fact that you're kind of just sitting and observing. That is interoception. The last few properties of the mind that I'm going to discuss before moving forward are beliefs, intellect, decision making, and problem solving. Only because these are some of the most important and the most problematic, because a lot of times our beliefs, our decision making, our problem solving, our intellect all influence what we like to call our social cognition. The way in which we think about each other, the way in which we think about ourselves in relation to each other, the way in which we think about society at large, the world, who we are as people, our purpose, our relation to each other, everything and all of it is influenced by the way in which you believe, how smart you are. It's influenced by your capacity to problem solve and your capacity to make good or rational or highly ethical decisions, however you want to categorize that. It all comes down to your cognition, emotion, intuition, right? Which is influencing your perception and your attention, which is influencing and informing all of these beliefs, all of these decisions, all of this problem solving, all of this intellect, right? You can't be smarter than what you know. And that's just the fact, right? If you've never learned of something in a holistic, efficient way, or if you've never been through something in a holistic way, then you can't talk on it. Then you can't speak to that fact fully if you don't have a full, complete understanding of it yourself. When we talk about things like the mind, when we take on these bigger scientific questions, I'm definitely not coming from it from a point of, we know everything we can. Absolutely not. I think and I hope that I mentioned at the beginning, there's still so much we don't know, not only about the mind, but about ourselves, the brain, the rest of the nervous system, the spinal cord. So there's so much still to be discovered. This is not coming from a, egocentric or a human-centered point of view in which, we've already conquered it. Absolutely not. We still have so much more we have yet to understand. This is simply a sort of synthesis of research from a long time ago, the most recent research, and kind of a bit of my own thoughts as well, to kind of inform all of us a little of this budding, field within psychology of the study of the mind. All of this functioning of the mind leads to what I like to think of as mindsets, right? What is your mindset? A lot of people think of it as your MO, right? What's your MO? That's a really cool acronym that comes from a Latin phrase, which is modus ordini, which means your regular mode, right? Your mode of being. So your MO is basically just the collection of your behaviors. Your MO is just what you do, right? Why do you do what you do? That's my MO, right? So your MO, I like to liken that to your mindset, because a lot of people may not understand, but thoughts and behaviors are absolutely linked together. Thoughts influence behaviors, behaviors influence thoughts. It's just a fact. Sometimes you may not think about your behaviors before you do them. Sometimes you may not enact your thoughts, but they may still exist somewhere there. They are still happening and influencing each other. You just somehow, as mediators with your mind, we get to pick, right, what thoughts we give attention to, what behaviors we give attention to. That is the power of the mind. And that's where mindset comes in. I like to think of mindset as the accumulation of our mental context, right? What is our mental context? All of that stuff we were talking, attention, perception, so mental context is the things we pay attention to, how we perceive the world, what kind of thoughts we have, what kind of feelings we have, what kind of intuitions we have, what kind of beliefs we have, how, our intellect, all of that kind of stuff, our emotional maturity and intelligence, our social capacity and intelligence, all of that, right? That's our mental context. So all of those things put together, right? Mindset is all of that plus our culture, plus our genetics, plus our environment, whatever our environment may be, physically, emotionally, all of it, our environment, socio-emotional, and also our current situation. So all of those things put together are mindset. We wouldn't have a mind, first and foremost, if we didn't have situations. Something we need to understand about the mind is that there are two aspects to it that are fundamental about it. The mind is temporal and situation dependent, or context dependent. So the mind changes with time, right? A very basic example is you don't think the same way when you're 5 years old as you do when you're 10 years old, as you do when you're 25 years old, as you do when you're 50 years old. That's a basic example. An even more rudimentary example is you're not thinking the same way when you wake up in the morning, if you're a morning person, happy-go-lucky, as you are at night when you're groggy and ready for bed. You may not be as enthusiastic for work at that time as you were maybe a couple hours before, right before lunch. So the mind changes with time, right? As you get older, it changes. As the day changes, as the seasons change. In the summertime, you may feel more inclined to go to the beach, but I don't think your mind may be thinking about jumping into waves in the middle of the winter. At that time, you may be thinking more about warmth and a hot cocoa or a bonfire. So there's so many things that time influence the mind, that we can keep, all of those many aspects in mind as well. The mind is situation or context dependent. The mind changes with each situation. When you are, say, on a full stomach, after work, at home, tired, some people may be thinking about falling asleep. Some people may be thinking about taking a shower. Some people may be thinking about stretching. Some people may be thinking about doing some skincare, some self-care. There's some people out there who may be thinking about going out, having some shots. I don't know. I'm not judging. But the mind is situation dependent. The mind always keeps in mind the time and the situation. That's the bottom line. The mind is always keeping those two in mind, because these two are some of the greatest informants to it. Aside from all of the stimuli that it's getting from the external world, from the senses that we're perceiving, from interoception of what's going on inside of the body, aside from all of that information, the mind is also being informed of time and situation, because those two are fundamentally relevant as well to not only its existence, but its own relevance, right? The mind would not be relevant if situations didn't call for it, if the time didn't call for it. So the mind is also having to be aware of what kinds of faculties are being most needed right then and there. Right? You think about the flight or fight response, right? The opposite of that, a lot of people like to call it rest and digest, right? The mind kind of enacts those two as well. It kind of is either on high alert or it's on, it's chill. What is it paying attention to? How is it perceiving the world? All of these things constantly being dealt with in the mindset as well. Mindset is this accumulation of all of this stuff, right? It's your why you think the way you think, informing why you do the things you do. So mindset being this time relevant, situation relevant accumulation of all of our thoughts, beliefs, emotions, of our genetics, our culture, of our environment, of so many things. It can also shift, right? Your mindset shifts. So I was talking about how your mindset shifts with time, right? It changes with time. A 5-year-old doesn't have the same priorities as a 50-year-old. Somebody who is hungry doesn't have the same priorities as somebody who is on a full stomach. So time changes, situation changes the mind. Some other things that can also change the mind are willpower. Some people have the willpower to sit and think to themselves, this isn't working for me, so I'm going to change it. And it's just done. Some people have that capacity where, if you say to somebody, if they say, I'm going to start waking up, or they don't have to tell anybody, I'm going to start waking up at 5 a.m. every day. And they just start waking up at 5 a.m. every day, no questions asked. If you change a behavior, you change your thoughts. You want to change a behavior, you gotta change your thoughts. Another way to change mindset is through intervention, right? Psychotherapy is one of the first and foremost examples that I can think of. Cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, talk therapy, all sorts of psychotherapy, right? The psychoanalytic approach. There's so many things. And it has been proven in research studies that having a good, genuine connection with your therapist will promote neurochemistry in your brain to have a genuine connection, right? And a genuine healing process in your brain and throughout your body of traumatic experiences that you discuss with a very well-trusted therapist. Psychotherapy really does work. It actually genuinely heals your nervous system. It heals not only your mind, your brain, and your body. In the synergistic understanding, they are all connected, mind, brain, and body. They really, they're really all there. You're all there. Psychotherapy is one good approach. Drugs has been another approach that has been used for millennia, right? For a very, very long time, since the beginning of humanity almost. But there are drugs that ancient civilizations used for medicinal reasons, but also for recreational reasons, but not so much recreational. Even in the case of psychedelics, a lot of these were used specifically for a process of mind change. A certain word that has been thrown around in particularly Christian theology is metanoia, which is a Greek word that means to change your mind, right? To change the mind. And it's a complete change of thoughts, beliefs, mindset, all of it together. So a lot of ancient civilizations use things like psychedelics, right? Peyote, ayahuasca, a lot of other, even mushrooms, right, are something that are now being used in science to be evaluated for this possibility and this process of changing the mind. So certain pharmaceutical drugs and certainly psychedelics have this capacity and have been found to be very efficient in getting this job done of changing the mindset. Another thing that will certainly change your mindset is a life-changing event, right? And this can be just any sort of thing, right? If you happen to survive a plane crash, a car crash, if you win the lottery, if you become famous, if you... there's so many, and there are absolutely life-changing events happening all around us all the time, right? Very acute ones that we shouldn't take for granted. Our life is very special and unique to us, and we should live it out beautifully and to the max. However, there are certain events that are undeniably life-changing that just about anybody could resonate with, in admitting that would certainly change my life. Anything that would fall under that category here, and I'm being extremely broad, there is no predefined measurement for these type of events. I'm going based off of the psychology and studies on awe, right, and the effects that awe and inspiration have on the mind and on the brain. So a life-changing event certainly has the capacity to do that, right? It'll get you thinking differently, it'll get you doing different things if you have something that really changes your life so drastically and so much. An unfortunate but very good example of a life-changing event that can absolutely change your mindset is a traumatic event, especially in earlier age, right? Trauma tends to change the mind. Trauma, the earlier it is, the worse it is, will absolutely inform cognition, emotion, intuition, perception, attention, beliefs, mindset, all of it, behaviors, everything, unfortunately, right? That's why trauma certainly in not only the physical sense of injury, but in the mental sense of emotional trauma and the scarring that happens mentally from events that one goes through, absolutely influence and affect you even physically later on in health. It has absolutely been proven that, for example, adverse childhood events, right, traumatic events that happen earlier in age when you're a child, those events will absolutely end up rippling into cardiovascular diseases, asthma, dementia. Certain illnesses have been linked already to trauma that happens early on in life. So all of these things absolutely have the power of changing your mindset. A few other things that can change your mind are experiences. When you have certain experiences, some can be so profound that they change your mind, like a life-changing event or a life trauma. But some experiences, even just over time, tend to change your mind as well. This can be either through the process of learning or just some experiences, a handful of them, that can really influence and inform your mind. Another one is learning. When you learn something new, it can also change your mind, right? Some people, particularly, and a good example is the scientific community, right? A good scientist will allow information to change their mind. What learning can do for the mind, the kind of effect that learning can have, right? Your memories can have on your mindset and changing those, right? Learning new things. The last thing that can change your mind is a separate type of learning called conditioning, which is an unfortunate one that the one that I can think of. Something like suppression or repression is something that a lot of times happens in childhood, right? Children who are beaten tend to be quieter adults, tend to not talk so much. And this inhibition of social interaction, of desire to socially engage other people, if due to physical abuse earlier in age, right, it's kind of like a traumatic event, but it is also kind of like conditioning in the sense that it could be this association between the beatings, right, and it's better off if I just don't speak, if I just don't say anything, I will no longer be abused. And there's many other examples I can give you of conditioning. There's better examples, not some lighthearted ones, right? A child who, if you're an uncle or an aunt, and if you have a niece or a nephew, and if every time you see them you give them $5, I guarantee you the next time if you see them, if you don't give them $5, they're kind of gonna look at you or like wait and like, where are my $5? Like they're gonna, it's nothing bad. It's not that they only expect money from you, but it's almost just a conditioning factor of, especially if they're more little, they kind of just have this automatic, they're constantly learning. So they're definitely gonna learn that. Our entire life, everything we are, everything I ever talk about and bring to the table is a constant summation of my knowledge with my experiences. I don't know anything that I've never learned, and I don't know anything that I've never been through. So anything I ever bring to the table is those two things, what I've learned and what I've been through. Our mindset is the same thing, right? What you've learned, what you've been through, what you're currently going through in action. That is mindset. We like to divide into one of two categories. There is a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset, sometimes it sounds like it's closed off, narrow-minded, but a fixed mindset simply is more of we're going to work with what we've got, right? Fixed mindset is a little more stubborn in essence. It's a little more of this is what I'm going to work with, this is what I'm going to do, right? So in essence, you can say a little closed-minded, a little narrow-minded, whereas the growth mindset is one that is a little more expansive, a little more open to novelty, a little more open to trying new things, trying it new ways. There is more than one way to solve a problem, right? If I have a problem and I'm thinking of it one way and there is no solution, then I gotta think about it in a different way. In order to find a solution, you gotta think in different ways, right? Sometimes the way you're thinking can be one just too narrow, one just too specific, and you have to broaden it a little. So as new problems come on, the growth mindset will more so look to different ways, look to newer ways of thinking in order to approach newer problems, especially as they become more complex. The more complex a problem is, the more time a growth mindset person will probably spend thinking about it as they evaluate all of their options. All of this, the growth, the mindset, the mind, its many functions, I think we would do an injustice to not talk about who we're talking about when we talk about these things. We're talking about the self. This person that is perceiving all of this person that is observing all of this, right? Sometimes I look at my hands and it's like, I'm kind of just watching. It really is just a matter of you realize what experience is, what reality is, what being alive is, what a miracle all of this is. And it takes you back, right? The fact that you have this self, the fact that you have these feelings, this capacity to think, this capacity to perceive this and have this conversation and listen to this right now. Your awareness of this self is an amazing capacity of the mind, right? The fact that you are, and that you know that you are, and that when you experience something, you're experiencing it and you know that you're experiencing it, all of that is great because the mind does that. The mind capacitates you to do that, right? Something that neuroscientists and psychologists constantly argue about is the binding problem. The fact that the mind, right, we, the brain, experience life and reality as a unified experience, right? I can't separate right now the dimensions of light from matter, from sound in the universe. All of it is just put together in my mind, and I can see shapes and I can see colors, and that's all perception. That's all my mind putting it together, making it work so that I can navigate this world. So the binding problem is how does the brain put all of this together so that it's not choppy, so that it's all one big thing, one experience, one continuous experience. So this sense of awareness of the self, right? This interoception, right? This inner awareness even highly informs our self and our sense of self, right? If you feel sick, if you feel bad, right, that's gonna inform your mind all day, right? If your stomach hurts, you're not gonna want to go out, you're not gonna want to go to school, you're not gonna want to go to work, you're not gonna want to study, you're not gonna want to do many things. Your mind and your body both are like, nah, we're clocked out today. So, or if you've just had an amazing day, right, and you're ready, you may be more enthusiastic to go and do something, right? You may be more enthusiastic to do something a little reckless or have some fun or whatever, whatever type of person your temperament your direction may lead you to into having. This sense of your awareness of who you are and what you're experiencing, that you're experiencing something, that you're having these thoughts, all of it put together is a great capacity, because now your mind and your body, right, are all they can be in sync, in unison, talking about the same person, you, right? They can be having the same conversation, and you get to interject. You get to tell them, this is who I am, this is what I want, da 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 da, right? You get to join in on that conversation between mind and body, being this self. That's what interoception allows. And so thinking about the self, thinking about this awareness, thinking about this sense of, who you are, even thinking about the mind-body conversation, right? The fact that I just said you can join in, it's because you're an individual, right? We all have the sense of individuality, the sense of self, the sense of oneness. We all think we're unique. We all think we're special. It's because we're very different to each other. And though we all may be similar in certain ways, no two people are exactly the same. No two people think exactly the same. No two people do things exactly the same. We may be very similar on a lot of things, but it may not always coincide on everything. That is because of our human individuality, right? We just are individuals. And our individuality informs our creativity, our capacity to be creative, our capacity to imagine a better future, our capacity to write a good book, a capacity to compose a beautiful song, to think of a great movie. Any sort of creative thought, any sort of innovative thought that a human has ever had has been an amazing miracle of the brain, of the mind. Because, what is it that generates in the mind this amazing capacity of, these are my thoughts, this is my experience, these are my beliefs, this is where I'm at, da 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 da, boom, new idea, right? Newness, novelty, and all from experience, all from life, all from being oneself. So, individuality, creativity. You can't be an individual, you can't be creative if you're not being your authentic self. Authenticity is by and large one of the best aspects of that psychology is just starting to get more and more into, and neuroscience now even. But what authenticity does for the self, for the brain, for the body, when you are being your authentic self, your brain and your body, there is a possibility of synergistic effects of health, right, through your brain and body by being your authentic self. Now, I won't get too far ahead of myself. The studies of the effects of authenticity have still got to be a lot more, scientifically backed up. The neuroscience and the psychology behind it still has a lot more work to do, but there's a lot of room to say that being your authentic self has really good effects. I mean, being a queer person myself, I can speak from a queer experience, and I'm sure other people from the community will be able to say this as well. But embracing and, just living out your authentic self every single day has amazing effects on your mental health, especially when we talk about the concept of being closeted, right? It's a denial of the authentic self, a temporary, hopefully, denial of the authentic self. But once you're out, right, coming out, right, this embracing of the authentic self, that's what all of it is. That's what pride is. That's what it's all meant to do, right? It's all meant to be the authentic self. We embrace the authentic self. We love the authentic self, and that's what it's all about. So authenticity certainly has got a lot to do and say with our health, mentally, physically, and in many, many respects. I have a personality. I'm not talking about personality as like a third person. I'm just talking about it as an aspect of who I am, right now. But personality really is two things. It's temperament and preferences, right? Your personality, you have a preference for something, and your personality, you have a temperament, right? What kind of attitude you have generally. Some people are generally more sad. Some people are generally more happy. Some people are generally angry. We're all generally in a state of flux, right? Experiencing no emotion. But there's a lot to say as to why society now, by and large, has instilled in us constant emotions. So whereas naturally we're supposed to be in a state of flux of really no emotion, we are experiencing a lot of emotions a lot of the time now. So it's exacerbating a lot of our emotional capacity now. The system that evolved and developed in order for us to, better identify our preferences and to be more in tune possibly with our thoughts and to really feel the world around us, now is being exacerbated by our society. And right, almost desensitized. But the sense of personality, right, our temperament, it's not that it's necessarily that you're constantly in this state, but it's more so, right, temperament, I like to think of it as your tendency to react, right? What state do you tend to react in? So there's a lot of people that, and if you ask them to do something, they will gladly do it with a smile on their face. My pleasure, Chick-fil-A type people. Those people are very happy and very, light-mooded and whatnot. There's people that if you ask them to do something and they'll be like, how long is it gonna take? And it's already like, no, I don't really want to do that. So there's that type of thing. If anybody can tell you about personalities, it's parents, it's teachers, and it's managers, right? That's the people that get to see personality the most, right? Temperament the most. Because you talk about the hard workers, you talk about the slackers, you think about the nerds, you think about the jocks, you think about the divas, you think about the mean girls. There's so many personalities, so many temperaments, so many preferences, right, that get displayed at home, right, amongst children, at school, amongst classmates, even in the cafeteria, right, or at work, right, amongst co-workers. Everybody's got a personality. And that gets displayed when we are in social settings. That's why even some people, I think nowadays, a lot of social anxiety may be influenced by an insecurity of personality, right? When people are insecure in, themselves or in who they are or whatnot, it can lead to where being in a social context may, lead to almost a de-individuation, even a loss of the self in the social group, because it's almost like I don't know myself. And so that's just my theory. I'm not saying that everybody that has social anxiety goes through that. There's so many other things that can inform social anxiety. One thing, for example, is I know that many times a lot of what we see in the news and in media can inform whether you want to be in a social setting or not. For a long time, people of the community were scared to continue going to gay bars or clubs or whatnot because they feared that, is this place going to also be shot up, or is my life going to be possibly put in danger by me being there? Unfortunately, children are targeted by some of the worst and atrocious events that have happened throughout history, but mass school shootings is a horrid example that I can think of, in which, right, parents may become, especially within the community where this happens, can become extremely weary of even sending their children to school. A lot of, personality, right, a lot of this temperament, a lot of this preference, right, this capacity for good, this capacity for bad, saintly versus evil, whatever you want to define it as, this duality seeming what it seems to be. What I like to say is it's a combination of things, right? Especially in abnormal psychology, research with psychopaths and sociopaths and serial killers and mass murderers and rapists and kidnappers, people who have done horrible things, people who have committed atrocious crimes, in their psyche, in their psychology, they're normal people. Their brains look just like yours and mine. Their neuroanatomy is very much not so different. Our bodies are very much not so different. So why are our minds so different, right? Why do we think so differently? Why do we feel and experience the world so differently? To the point where they have the capacity to do the things that they do, and sometimes some of them feel absolutely no remorse. It's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated, but it's because there's a combination of factors. It's a complexity of factors, right? We talk about the biopsychosocial approach in psychotherapy that really keeps in mind the biology, psychology, and the socio-emotional setting of the individual, right? It talks about genetics and genetic predispositions to certain illnesses or certain conditions, or mutations in genetics that, cause certain illnesses or cause certain behaviors. We talk about the psychology, which is thoughts and beliefs and all of the things that contribute to that. And we talk about the socio-emotional environment, which is the place in which you grew up, right? Geographically speaking, but also family, right? What was that structure like? What was the home like? What was the school like? All of that, right? That kind of socio-emotional environment. So, it's complex. I read a book in high school called The Lucifer Effect, which was written by Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He is controversial and some of his research is controversial, but the point that this book specifically made is people like Jeffrey Dahmer, people like, Charles Manson, people that did all of these atrocious things that, like the ones we're talking about, they're all normal human beings, right? A lot of times, some of them even had families. Some of them, some people that have done atrocious things have had double lives. Anybody has the capacity for evil. That's what that book taught me. And it was scary. It was scary to make that realization, especially in high school, right? You're so young and you're like, oh shit. But it almost caused my shadow work to begin sooner, right? Because I had to reconcile that I cannot judge people who do atrocious things because they are just like me, right? And I am just like them. And I could say that I'm different. I could say that, but sometimes people in complex societies are not, right? Sometimes we do atrocious things to the people we love, and it's not even things that, are that horrid, like maybe, murdering and, cutting body parts, whatever. But, infidelity is something horrid that sometimes people do to their loved one, to their significant other, to their family, right? If children are involved. Neglect, right? Parents to children, right? When parents walk out, or parents who are not fully there for their children. That is an unfortunate thing that can also happen. Sometimes inner sibling abuse, right? Where siblings bully each other or physically beat each other and whatnot. There's so many different examples, right? And I think I'm focusing on family examples, but bullying in school, there's a lot of impact that we have on each other. And when we really, really consider each other and these people, right, that happen to go to jail, that happen to go to court for these things, any one of us sometimes is a ticking time bomb. That's why mental health is so important. That's why taking care of the mind is so important. What is in here has to be stellar. It has to be great. We spend a lot of our time in this world, right, externally speaking, but you spend more time still in your mind. Because though you are perceiving this world, all of these perceptions are simply happening here, right? And they're informing the representations your mind is creating of this world right now. As you are watching me, as you are listening to me, if you're allowing it to happen, these words, these images, these thoughts are informing the thoughts you already have. They're informing the beliefs you already have. And if there are thoughts and beliefs in there that you want to change, this talk can help you change them right now. It is about our openness. It's about our capacity to allow experiences to impact us halfway, right? And it's also halfway that experience be there, that connection be there, that experience really do be that forceful, that experience really is that strong, right? That impactful on us. All of these things, individuality, personality, creativity, intellect, beliefs, cognition, emotion, perception, attention, intuition, all of it, right? The mind, right? It's a very, very complex place. And even the things we talked about today, this was a lot, and it's still just the tip of the iceberg when we talk about cognitive psychology and neuroscience. And if you really, really get into even more of a lot of the research other psychologists have done in specific areas of things like attention and perception and cognition and whatnot. Take care of your mind. Make sure that your mindset is in the right place, right? Take care of your priorities, check your beliefs, check your goals, check your personality, your temperament, your preferences. Check the way in which you're living your life. Thoughts influence behaviors, behaviors influence thoughts, right? Your authenticity, your individuality. Don't forget yourself. Be who you are. There's so much that the mind keeps in mind that you should keep in mind is influencing you all the time. We're getting just now into the science of it, but even epigenetics proves that your experiences even change you at the genetic level, right? So there's so much that our life, our existence even, is a testament to. And that you have a mind, that you have the capacity to think and to have a mindset, right? Use it to grow. Use your mind to constantly allow your mind to just grow. Don't even think about it. Let that be your MO. Growth. Constantly. If you have to question your beliefs, so be it. If you really want to grow, you have to do it. You got to question everything. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your behaviors, absolutely everything. Who you are. You got to almost start from scratch. You got to start over, right? And really, really look at your mind as a home, and you have to construct it. You have to lay down the foundation of your mind. Your mind, like I just said, you may experience this world a lot of the time, but you're experiencing your mind even more still. Your mind is like a home, right? It's like your hub. You got to keep what you want in there. If you like Pringles and pop and Nutella and toast from time to time, then you got to keep that stuff in your pantry up in here. You know what I mean? If you like to have spas and, you like to do face masks and you like to get massage, you got to keep that stuff in here. All of that has to exist in your mind. Your mind is your inner home. It's your inner environment. So you have to construct it in the way you want it to be. You got to construct it as the home you want it to be. Live in your dream home up here constantly. I just want to thank each and every single one of you for joining me today on this episode of Neural Nectar. And I hope to see you again in the future. Tune in, and I will be bringing some more riveting and invigorating stories for you. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you in the future.